What if everything you were taught about leadership is wrong? What if morality alone cannot protect power, kindness cannot guarantee loyalty, and honesty without strategy is a weakness? More than 500 years ago, a political thinker wrote a book so brutally honest that it was labeled evil, dangerous, and corrupt. Yet today, world leaders, corporate strategists, intelligence agencies, and power players still study its lessons in silence. That book is The Prince, and the mind behind it was Niccolo Machiavelli. This is not a motivational speech. This is not about being liked. This is about understanding power the way it truly operates, not how we wish it operated. If you truly understand the Prince mindset, you will start seeing politics, business, and even human relationships through a completely different lens. The reality Machiavelli saw Niccolo Machiavelli was not writing from fantasy. He lived in a time of political chaos in Renaissance Italy, where betrayal was common, alliances shifted overnight, and rulers were assassinated without warning. He observed leaders rise and fall not because they were good or bad, but because they understood power or failed to understand it. His central insight was disturbingly simple. People are not guided by morality as much as they are guided by self-interest. They are loyal when it benefits them and disloyal when fear, profit, or survival pushes them in another direction. This observation forms the foundation of the Prince mindset. It demands that a leader see human nature without illusions. It forces you to stop leading based on how people should behave and start leading based on how they actually behave. Machiavelli argued that rulers who cling to idealistic morality often lose everything because they assume others will behave honorably. In reality, many people prioritize personal gain, safety, and advantage over loyalty or gratitude. When circumstances change, allegiances change. This is not cynicism, it is strategic awareness. Leaders who survive are those who anticipate betrayal before it happens and design systems that make loyalty more beneficial than rebellion. The Prince mindset is about preparation, not paranoia. It is about understanding incentives and consequences so clearly that you are never surprised by human behavior, love or fear. The most misunderstood lesson, one of the most quoted ideas from the Prince, is Machiavelli's discussion about whether it is better for a ruler to be loved or feared. His conclusion is often simplified, but its depth is far more strategic. He explains that while it is ideal to be both loved and feared, it is far safer to be feared if one must choose. Love depends on the emotions of others, and emotions can change quickly under pressure. Fear, however, is anchored in consequences. When people know that certain actions will bring punishment, they think carefully before acting against you. However, Machiavelli carefully distinguishes fear from hatred. A ruler who becomes hated invites rebellion. A ruler who establishes controlled fear without cruelty maintains order. The Prince mindset is not about random brutality. It is about calculated authority. It is about setting boundaries so clear that crossing them is unthinkable. In modern leadership, this translates into consistency, accountability, and consequences that are predictable rather than emotional. Employees, citizens, or followers do not need to love you passionately. They need to respect your authority and understand the cost of undermining it. This principle continues to operate in modern politics and business. Leaders who rely solely on popularity often struggle when crisis strikes, because popularity does not automatically enforce discipline. Strong leadership requires structure. It requires the ability to make difficult decisions even when they reduce short-term approval. The Prince mindset teaches that long-term stability often requires short-term discomfort. Appear virtuous, act strategic. One of the most controversial aspects of Machiavelli's philosophy is his argument that a ruler does not always need to be virtuous, but must always appear virtuous. This statement shocks many readers because it seems to promote deception. However, Machiavelli is describing political survival, not moral perfection. He observed that people judge leaders primarily by visible behavior and outcomes, not by hidden intentions. Therefore, perception becomes a powerful tool. A prince should appear merciful, faithful, humane, honest, and religious, but he must be prepared to act against these virtues when survival demands it. The reason is simple. Rigid morality can be exploited by less scrupulous opponents. If a leader refuses to adapt while rivals manipulate, deceive, and strategize, the rigid leader loses power. Once power is lost, even good intentions become meaningless because they can no longer influence outcomes. In modern terms, this lesson is about adaptability. Leaders must maintain public trust while privately making strategic calculations. Transparency has limits in competitive environments. Businesses do not reveal all strategies to competitors. Governments do not expose all intelligence to adversaries. The Prince mindset acknowledges this reality and accepts that power requires flexibility. Cruelty used well vs. cruelty used poorly. Machiavelli introduces a powerful distinction between cruelty used well and cruelty used poorly. Cruelty used poorly is continuous, unpredictable, and excessive. It breeds resentment and long-term instability. Cruelty used well is swift, decisive, and limited. It establishes control quickly and then stops, allowing people to adapt and move forward. This principle reflects a deeper psychological truth. Uncertainty is more terrifying than severity. When punishments are random, fear becomes hatred. When actions are decisive but controlled, stability returns. The Prince mindset emphasizes that if harsh measures are necessary, they should be implemented all at once, rather than repeatedly over time. Repeated harm keeps wounds fresh. Decisive action allows recovery. In organizational leadership, this can be seen when major restructuring happens quickly rather than through endless small cuts. In politics, it appears when reforms are implemented firmly rather than hesitantly. The lesson is not about cruelty for pleasure. It is about eliminating instability efficiently. Fortune and virtue controlling destiny. Machiavelli introduces two powerful concepts: fortune and virtue. Fortune represents the unpredictable forces of life, luck, timing, external events. Virtue represents strength, skill, courage, and decisive action. According to Machiavelli, fortune controls about half of human affairs, but the other half belongs to those bold enough to shape events. He compares fortune to a river that floods and destroys everything in its path. Wise leaders build dams before the flood arrives. They prepare, they strengthen foundations. They anticipate chaos. The Prince mindset does not deny uncertainty. It prepares for it and understands that waiting passively for luck is weakness. Strong leaders create opportunities instead of waiting for them. This philosophy is deeply relevant today. Markets crash. Political climates shift. The technology disrupts industries overnight. Those who adapt quickly survive. Those who hesitate disappear. The Prince mindset values boldness over hesitation because hesitation invites defeat. The danger of mercenaries and weak foundations. Machiavelli strongly warned against relying on mercenaries and auxiliary forces. In his time, mercenaries were soldiers hired to fight wars for payment rather than loyalty. He believed they were dangerous because they lacked commitment and would abandon a ruler when payment stopped or danger increased. He argued that a prince must rely on his own forces, those directly loyal to him. In modern terms, this translates into building strong internal structures rather than depending entirely on external support. Leaders who outsource critical power lose control. Businesses that rely completely on unstable partnerships risk collapse. The Prince mindset emphasizes self-reliance and internal strength. Power built on borrowed loyalty is fragile. Power built on internal cohesion is resilient. Why good men fail in politics. One of Machiavelli's harshest observations is that good men often fail in political environments because they refuse to adapt to corrupt systems. He explains that a man who wishes to act virtuously in every situation will inevitably suffer among those who are not virtuous. This does not mean goodness is worthless. It means goodness without strategy is vulnerable. The Prince mindset teaches realism. It advises leaders to understand the environment before choosing tactics. In hostile systems, naive honesty can become self-destruction. Strategic intelligence must accompany moral intention. Controlling narrative and perception. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes reality. People judge based on appearances and outcomes. Therefore, managing reputation becomes a strategic necessity. A prince must carefully craft his public image because reputation influences loyalty, fear, and respect. Once a ruler is perceived as weak, opposition grows. Once perceived as decisive and competent, resistance decreases. Modern politics revolves around narrative control. Media, communication, strategy, branding, these are contemporary forms of Machiavelli's insights. The prince mindset recognizes that image is not superficial, it is power. The modern prince, although written in the 16th century, the prince continues to influence leadership theory, political science, and strategic thinking. The term Machiavellian is often used negatively, but at its core, Machiavelli's philosophy is about understanding reality without illusion. It is about separating personal morality from strategic necessity. It is about recognizing that power, once lost, is difficult to regain. In today's competitive world, leaders who combine strategic calculation with controlled empathy often rise faster than those guided solely by emotion. The prince mindset does not encourage cruelty for its own sake. It encourages awareness, preparation, adaptability, and decisive action. The hardest truth Machiavelli teaches is this: power is fragile, and maintaining it requires clarity about human nature. The world does not reward intentions, it rewards results. Leaders who ignore this reality risk losing everything they aim to protect. The prince mindset forces uncomfortable reflection. It asks whether you are prepared to make difficult decisions. It asks whether you understand incentives, fear, loyalty, and perception. It challenges the comforting belief that goodness alone guarantees survival. 500 years later, the lessons of Niccolo Machiavelli still echo in boardrooms, parliaments, and presidential offices. Not because they are pleasant, but because they are realistic. And once you see the world through that lens, you cannot unsee it.